Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the very first ever Regional Toronto Mindful Moment. I am so thrilled that you're here. My name is Michael, and if we haven't met in person, I work out of the Briar Hill store, and I will be leading us through this first mindful moment here together this week. Now, how this is going to work is that every single week we're going to have one of these mindful moments based on a monthly theme. And over the course of the next year, of course, each month will have a theme. And to start us off here in February, our theme is on the mindful concept of openness. Now, we're going to use this theme to explore how we may be open to mindfulness, where we may be a little bit closed off or hesitant to the practice of mindfulness, and how we may be already practicing mindfulness in our own lives, as well as some key foundational understandings as well. Now, what is mindfulness? To that, I would say there are many answers from many different people, but one of the definitions that everyone always comes back to is from a gentleman named Jon Kabat-Zinn. Now, Jon Kabat-Zinn is a professor, and specifically in the field of mindfulness. He helped create something called MBSR, which is Mindful-Based Stress Reduction Therapy, something some of us may have experienced. And he came up with the definition of mindfulness as, mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. Now, that can be a little bit of a mouthful, but what I like to think of mindfulness as is awareness. We practice mindfulness and meditation to bring more awareness in our lives, which thus creates more choice in our lives, which thus creates more freedom. We'll be getting more on that as we continue into our months. But what I would like to talk about today is some of the basic facts and benefits that might happen for you when you practice mindful meditation. We go back into neuroscience to begin. So one thing I'm absolutely fascinated with is that our brain is adapting constantly. It's always changing. Now, a long time ago, we didn't really think the brain changed too much. We thought it was pretty static from early age or teenage age. We thought that it was shaped and it stayed that way until we died. That's absolutely not the case, as Richie Davidson from the Center for Healthy Minds reminds us, and that is, of course, out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He also wants us to know a few things. The first is that our brain does have the capacity to change. The second is that that change is measurable both in an everyday lived experience sense as well as a scientific sense. And that new ways of thinking that we develop through practices like meditation and mindful living can actually change our brains for the better. Now, there are a couple of parts of our brain I want you to remember when we're talking about mindfulness. The first is our prefrontal cortex, which resides right at the front of our brain. That is the center for reasoning, planning, emotional regulation. And then we have this little thing called the amygdala. It's about the size of our thumb, and if I'm correct. And that sits just a little further back in our brain. Now, that is our center of fight or flight. It is also the center for our anxious and fear-based emotions. It's something that comes from a long, long, long time ago. Now, when we practice mindfulness, many things happen in our brain, but a few things to note. For one, the gray matter in our prefrontal cortex after a mindful practice becomes more dense. And this is the area that is primarily responsible for executive functioning, so things like I mentioned, problem solving, planning, rationalization, emotional regulation, that kind of thing. The amygdala, after a mindful practice, actually shrinks just a little bit, which is in relation to how we are in a fight or flight mode, how we're processing anxiety, how we're feeling fear, the amount of that we're actually feeling. And then finally, there's something that we like to think about as the default mode network, and there's reduced activity in that network. And now to think of that, I like to think of it in two ways. We have both a narrative default circuitry or default network that we have, and we have a direct experience circuitry. Are you with me still? In this narrative, many of us exist in this narrative circuitry, or what is known as the default circuitry. And that's where we see outside information We filter what that information means in our brain, and then we add in our own interpretation. That is the narrative. We're essentially creating a story about information. That's our default network. But mindfulness allows more activity and more access to the direct experience circuit, and that's essentially experiencing information as it comes into the senses in real time. Isn't that cool? We can actually be more in touch to what is happening in the moment through our practice of mindfulness. Now that was a heck of a lot, so you maybe want to watch this video again if you want to get a little bit of that science and the facts behind why we have a mindful practice. But I always find that if we know a little bit of the actual facts of what's happening in our body when we practice this kind of practice, we are a little bit more open to exploring it. So this week, I challenge you to connect with your reps in store to see how you might practice a little bit more meditation yourself. I also encourage you, if you have never meditated before, to join me this Wednesday on the video call, which you should see in this week's Juicy Goods, and if not, it'll be posted on your Facebook page, on your store's Facebook page, to practice the meditation with me as well. My friends, I wish you a wonderful first week of February. And I'm really excited that we're on this adventure together. We're all going to delve deep into what our ultimate happiness and well-being could look like this year. I wish you all well. Have a great week. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.